Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are a step closer to changing rules for certifying presidential elections. The House took a vote this afternoon, and there is some support in the Senate as well. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
With a vote of 229 to 203, House lawmakers on Capitol Hill passed the Presidential Election Reform Act. All Democrats voted yes, with 9 Republicans joining them.
Preventing radical state legislators from attempting to nullify the election.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney wrote the bill alongside her colleague on the January 6th Select Committee, Democrat Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. The goal is to make it harder to overturn a certified presidential election in the future through changing the 1887 Electoral Count Act.
Our bill reaffirms what the Constitution and existing law make plain. The Vice President has no authority or discretion to reject official state electoral slates.
Republican leadership pushed for a no vote, saying it does nothing to strengthen the integrity of our elections. Democrats largely focused on how this bill is meant to prevent a replay of January 6th.
And what the Select Committee has demonstrated, that those seeking to overturn the election were exploiting the vulnerabilities in the law.
Republicans pushed back that a bill of such importance should not have been rushed.
I'm not calling to question whether this bill is good or whether this bill is bad. What I'm saying is we have not been involved in this process, and we're being told to just take the word of someone because they call themselves a conservative commentator.
The House took the vote on the 38-page bill less than 3 days after the final text was released.
Why rush such a significant piece of legislation when the next presidential certification won't happen for over 2 years? Well, it's pretty simple, Madam Speaker. The midterm elections are just weeks away, and the Democrats are desperately trying to talk about their favorite topic, former President Trump.
Now, the Senate has its own version of a bill to make changes to the Electoral Count Act. That version is bipartisan, written by Republican Senator Susan Collins from Maine and Democrat Senator Joe Manchin. Those two senators just announced today that they do have 10 Republican co-sponsors on that Senate version, which means there is enough Republican support in the Senate to make changes to the Electoral Count Act. Now, how quickly Congress can get this bill to the White House largely depends on how fast the House and the Senate can come together and reconcile the differences between the two versions. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
In his speech to the UN today, President Biden responds to Russia's nuclear threats. That's as he again comments on China and Taiwan. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
Addressing the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, President Biden condemns Russia for invading Ukraine and making new threats to the West.
Again, just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime.
Biden's speech comes hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a rare partial mobilization of citizens to join the fight. Putin also warned that if the West pursues what he calls a nuclear blackmail,
we will certainly use all the means at our disposal. Our country also has various means of destruction.
But an expert says
all of these threats have been hollow.
On another front, Biden says this about U.S. and China as tensions escalate.
We do not seek conflict. We do not seek a Cold War.
And on Taiwan, Biden notes that the U.S.
remain committed to our one China policy, which has helped prevent conflict for 4 decades.
And that comes just days after Biden vowed to defend Taiwan militarily against a Chinese invasion. But the White House said there's been no change in policy. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
And to discuss President Biden's speech at the UN, I sat down with Congressman Greg Steube earlier today.
Congressman Greg Steube, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Congressman, President Biden was at the UN today where he gave a speech where he said the United States is not seeking a conflict or a Cold War with China. How do you think the CCP reflects on those comments?
Yeah,
days ago, his administration is dialing back what he said about Taiwan and the United States defending Taiwan. So it's like 1 second he says things, and then his own administration has to dial back that we're going to defend Taiwan, and then the next statement he's making is, oh, we don't want any altercation with the Chinese. They don't know what their foreign policy is. We all know that Joe Biden and his family is completely compromised and corrupt as it relates to China. Billions of dollars have gone to his son's company. Other people that are affiliated with the agency and his administration are either on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party or have been or somehow associated with them. So he's obviously trying to buffer back statements he made on Taiwan. China is the #1 national security threat to the United States. It is a fact, and we should be changing our approach from an administration policy objectives and from congressional objectives to prepare for that and prepare for the defense of our nation if China is so bold as to do things. But they have been doing things. They've been doing not overt things, but coming after patents and IP and intellectual property and instigating themselves in all sorts of different things, from higher education to infiltrating the government at the highest levels.
Switching gears a little bit, you're scheduled to vote, I think, a little bit later today. Why do you think the Democrats are in such a rush to push the Electoral Count Act?
Because they want to try to gerrymander it for their own benefit. I mean, we have 3 more days after this week of legislative business before the midterm elections. They realize if we take the majority back in November during a lame duck Congress, very, very few things will get done. And so they're trying to jam through as many things as they can. And the way that Washington works under Pelosi's House, we didn't even get the language of this bill until like less than 24 hours ago. A lot of members, I can guarantee you, haven't had an opportunity to read it. And now we're being told that we may be voting on it as early as today. Yet we still have been told if it's going to be today or not. And that's just how disorganized the Democrats are, and shows you that this is not coming from a process that was well thought out, that committees have discussed, that the media has had an opportunity to digest the language and ask questions. They just pump out language on a bill, send it straight to the floor. They don't give us the language until less than 24 hours before we vote, and then all the Democrats vote for Pelosi and all the Republicans vote against it.
What are you hearing back home in your district in terms of the top issues in the upcoming election?
Top issue, 100%, no question, is immigration. We have an invasion at our southern border. Americans they are seeing what is happening from that. Illegal immigrants all across the country, rise in crime. We now have 78 known terrorists that have come across the border. When Mayorkas was in the Judiciary Committee the last time, he refused to answer the question if his agency had released these known terrorists into our country. What are they doing with them? The American people don't stand for letting terrorists into our country. They don't stand for high crime. And I think there's going to be an edict from the American people in November about the direction of the country should be going, and that #1 issue is border security.
Congressman Greg Steube, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The U.S. dollar went up nearly 0.5% to the highest it's been since 2002. The jump happened after Russia said it was calling in 300,000 military reserves, escalating the war in Ukraine. When there's extreme political tension between countries, investors tend to trust the U.S. dollar more. How well the dollar is doing is a comparison to how things are going in other countries, even though inflation is high in the U.S. too. But just as Russia's announcement pushed up the value of the dollar, it also pushed up oil prices 2.5%. Also on Wednesday, the Federal Reserve hiked the interest rate by 0.75 percentage point. It was the first time that the Fed hiked the interest rates by this much in 3 consecutive months. This is the highest level interest rates have been since early 2008. New York Attorney General Letitia James is suing former President Trump, the Trump Organization, and 3 of Trump's adult children. This is part of her years-long probe into their business dealings.
New York Attorney General Letitia James announced Wednesday that she has filed a lawsuit against former President Trump, the Trump Organization, and its senior executives. She claimed that they are responsible for $250 million worth of financial fraud.
The complaint demonstrates that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system, and thereby cheating all of us. He did this with the help of the other defendants, his children, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump, and former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg and Trump Organization Controller Jeffrey McConney.
James claimed that from 2011 to 2021, Trump and the Trump Organization knowingly and intentionally created more than 200 false and misleading valuations of assets, and that they did so to obtain a variety of financial benefits, such as having banks lend money to the Trump Organization on more favorable terms. The Attorney General is asking the court to do the following.
We are asking the court to, among other things, permanently bar Mr. Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, Eric Trump, from serving as an officer or director in any corporation or similar entity registered and or licensed in New York. To bar Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization from entering into any New York State commercial real estate acquisition or from applying for loans from any financial institution in New York for 5 years.
Trump reacted to the lawsuit on Truth Social, writing in part, quote, "Another witch hunt by a racist attorney general. She is a fraud who campaigned on a Get Trump platform." During her campaign for attorney general in 2018, James said, quote, "No one is above the law, including this illegitimate president. I look forward to going into the office of attorney general every day, suing him." Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.